My son died in the fire. The rescue team couldn't break in, and my husband, who was the team leader, had no choice but to reluctantly take the rescue team to another place. I was constantly trapped in the pain of losing my son and couldn't extricate myself until I saw that little boy who had been rescued sitting in my husband's car. His first love was holding the boy in her arms while chatting and laughing with my husband. They looked just like a happy family of 3. Only then did I realize that my husband had lied about not being able to break in back then, just to ensure that his first love son was rescued. I ran over and asked them to return my son, but his first love pushed me under the car, and I died on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my husband misreported the fire situation. Quick! The rescue conditions here are no longer suitable. Everyone go to Area A immediately. My familiar voice, accompanied by the crackling sound of the raging fire, broke into my ears. I opened my eyes and a wave of heat swept over me, along with the ashes. James was gripping my shoulders. Stop making a scene. This building can't be broken into anymore. Do you want me and my men to die? In my previous life, James had told me the same thing. I cried and begged him to try again, but he sternly rebuked me. Olivia, there are still people waiting for rescue in other places. If we waste any more time here, those who could have been saved won't be saved either. I'm the father of our son, but I'm also the rescue team leader. Do you understand at all? At that time, I trusted him and thought he had no choice but to do so. So, I watched as he led everyone toward the location where his first love son was, and I fell to my knees and cried. Slap. I slapped him hard across the face and glared at him. Useless. Then I turned around and ran with all my might towards the commander, who was more than 10 meters away. Please, my son is still in Building B. Commander, I'm sorry, my wife has lost her mind. James chased after me and pulled me aside, saying to the commander, I've already checked Building B. There are no conditions for rescue. No, my son is on the 10th floor. In such a short time, he couldn't have checked that far. I shouted heartbreakingly. But James rebuked me even louder. We can't break into Building B anymore. Just because our son is inside, should we make others wait in vain on the other side? That's enough. Before I could retort, the commander had already frowned. According to what you said, there are still people in Building B? James was taken aback and immediately changed his words. No, Commander, I mean there should be no survivors in Building B. What do you mean, should? The conditions inside are too harsh. It's hard for anyone to survive, let alone a child. This is simply outrageous. The commander called several team members over. What if someone is still alive? Are you just going to let them die out here? Come over here, check Building B. James panicked and immediately tried to stop them. Commander, the rescue conditions in Building B are too harsh. We might not be able to get out if we go in. But the rescue in Area A is completely feasible, and there are children waiting inside. We don't need to give up on those who can definitely be saved just for the sake of those who might be saved. If we go to Area A, we will definitely be able to rescue the people there. I felt as if the distant fire was burning right into my heart, and I wanted to tear James apart. At this moment, he still wanted to divert the rescue force that I had finally managed to obtain to his first love son. Fortunately, the commander gave him a fierce glare. You also said there's a possibility of saving them. If we don't go to Building B, those people won't be saved at all. Despair appeared on James' face. You stay out of this. The commander patted him on the shoulder. You're the child's father. Relatives are easily influenced by emotions during rescues. If you do something that violates the rules in a fit of desperation, you might get yourself into trouble too. Go to Area A. We'll take care of your son. James' defeated eyes suddenly lit up, and he replied almost without hesitation, yes. He turned around and led some of the rescue team members towards Area A in big strides. Looking at that figure running towards Area A without hesitation, I smiled bitterly. Clearly, the fire in Area A was no smaller than that in Building B. Clearly, it seemed that it would be easier to rescue our son. The commander was clearly giving him an excuse to back down. How could a man who didn't care about anything else for the sake of his first love son be influenced by family affection while rescuing his own son? Standing downstairs, the team led by the commander still hadn't shown up. I tried several times to rush in, but the team members forcibly held me back. The searing heat burned my eyes, and tears streamed down my face as I stared fixedly at the exit. A shout came from behind me. "He's been rescued! He's been rescued!" I turned around and saw James holding his first-love son. Ignoring the fact that his own body was still on fire, he desperately carried the boy to a safe area. Unlike in my previous life, this time I had managed to get some of the police force to go to Building B. Without the full mobilization of last time, the child was clearly injured and lay limply in James' arms. I snorted coldly. Until my dying day, I would never forget how in my previous life, I knelt outside Building B while my son was burned alive inside. Meanwhile, behind me, James had triumphantly held up his ex-lover's unharmed son, celebrating the successful rescue with his team. "Quick! This child is injured," the commander's voice called out. I whipped my head around to see the squad who had charged into Building B emerging through the flames. The commander was tightly holding my son in his arms. "Tiger." I rushed forward and took my child from him. "The ambulance is on its way. The child is in your care now." "I need to tend to this wound," the commander said. His arm was streaming with blood. My heart ached at the sight. I couldn't hold back my tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much. This isn't good. The child is going into shock." One of the remaining team members examined Tiger's condition. One of them immediately turned his head. "James." "Tiger," but his voice abruptly cut off. I turned to look in the same direction. Not far away, James was performing CPR on a child lying flat on the ground. "Chang, don't sleep. Breathe. Don't be afraid. Uncle will save you. Don't fall asleep," he shouted frantically, calling his ex-lover's son by his nickname, ignoring the blood still flowing from his own leg. A team member approached him. "Captain, you should get that leg wound treated first. Let me take over." But James shoved him away. "Move. Are you ready to take responsibility if this child doesn't make it?" The team member who had tried to call him over stopped in his tracks. My son was barely 15 feet away waiting for medical attention, yet James insisted on tending to someone else's child even though there were professionals available to take over. I wanted to confront him right then and there. Instead, I bit my lip, looked down, laid Tiger flat on the ground, cleared his airways, checked his vital signs, and began performing CPR myself. After receiving proper medical attention, Tiger's condition improved significantly. Soon after, he began coughing violently and spoke in a weak voice. "Dad? Did Dad come to save Tiger?" "Tiger." My voice trembled. He blinked his eyes and, seeing me clearly, forced a smile on his soot-blackened little face. "Mom came too. It must have been Dad who rescued Tiger, right?" I knew it. Dad would never abandon Tiger. Dad is a great hero. He's alive. He's alive. Haha. James's inappropriate laughter rang out. I looked up to see Chung coughing violently while James, beaming with joy, lifted the child in his arms. He high-fived the team members gathered around him. "We saved him. Ha ha ha. Tiger, your dad, I didn't know how to explain. Did Dad not only save Tiger, but other kids too? Tiger forced another smile between labored breaths. Dad is amazing. When Tiger grows up, he wants to be a great hero like Dad too. Mom, do you know? Being burned by fire hurts so much. In the future, Tiger wants to rescue everyone caught in fires. Otherwise, they'll suffer too much." A tear fell with a plop onto Tiger's face. I couldn't bear to imagine how much despair and pain Tiger had endured in my previous life. This child, until his dying breath, had firmly believed his father would come to save him. I stood up and walked over to James. Slap. My hand struck his face hard. The celebration came to an abrupt halt. "Don't you have a son of your own? Why are you over here taking care of someone else's child?" I screamed as tears streamed down my face. "Tiger still believes it was you who rescued him. But what did you do? Not only did you not save him, you didn't even ask about him once. Who is this child to you that you would abandon your own son?" Have you lost your mind, Olivia? You're scaring the children. James immediately backed away, holding Chung protectively in his arms. I stepped forward, but several team members quickly intervened. Sister-in-law, please don't be angry. The captain had no choice, one of them pleaded. No choice? I shouted. He didn't hesitate for a second when he abandoned his own son in Building B. Olivia. James frowned. Don't make a scene. This child has a congenital heart condition. He can't handle stress. I'm the team captain, and cases like this always take priority. Would you have me violate protocol for our son? Is it really about protocol or your personal feelings? I grabbed him by the collar. Is it protocol to direct everyone to Area A when Building B was still accessible? Didn't you say Building B wasn't safe for rescue? Then how did one squad manage to bring our son back alive? Is this child named Chung so important that you would ignore your own living son? Despite my pulling at his clothes, James never loosened his grip on Chung. Instead, he bent down to shield the child. Stop being unreasonable. Let go. A force slammed into me, pushing me to the ground. A familiar woman in Saint Laurent high heels appeared beside James, her voice urgent. James. Seeing Chung in James's arms, Emma burst into tears. James, how did Chung get hurt? Didn't you say you'd have everyone rescue him? James remained silent, discreetly glancing in my direction. Emma followed his gaze and noticed that team members were still tending to Tiger. Her eyes instantly reddened. She lunged at me, trying to tear at my clothes. So you're the reason my son almost died. If everyone had gone to save Cheng, he wouldn't have been so badly injured. Despite her high heels and slender figure, I was physically fit from regular exercise. I caught her hand and delivered a hard slap that knocked her to the ground. Your son's life matters, but doesn't mine? Why should Tiger burn to death while my husband takes everyone to rescue your son? Say one more crazy thing, and it won't just be your son who's injured. I won't let you off either. Olivia, watch what you're saying, James shouted, moving forward to help Emma up. I glared at him. Don't you dare help her. James froze mid-motion. I stared at him coldly. Whose husband are you, exactly? The scene became incredibly awkward. The crowd of onlookers was growing larger by the minute. Everyone, please be the judge here. A grief-stricken wail suddenly rang out, drawing everyone's attention to Emma. Her white bodycon dress accentuated her attractive figure. Her face, with its sultry makeup, was now streaked with tears, making her look like a fallen goddess. Several men couldn't help but show expressions of concern. What happened, beautiful? One asked. Yeah. What's going on here? Asked another. She pointed at me. If she hadn't pulled away people who were supposed to save my son, he would have been completely unharmed. It's only because the captain wasn't fooled by her and risked his life to save my son that he's alive at all. And now she's hitting people because of it. Isn't every child's life valuable? Why should everyone go rescue her son while mine burns to death? Her sobbing touched many of the men in the crowd. You bitch. Who's the one who wanted everyone to save their own son? I lunged forward and grabbed Emma by the collar. Just as I raised my hand, a pair of strong hands seized me from behind and forcefully pulled me away. James restrained me with a police hold, pinning my arms behind my back. Enough. You're the one who stole resources meant for saving Cheng. Slapping me is one thing, but how dare you hit the victim's mother? With those words, the crowd erupted. She not only stole their rescue resources and hit people, but she also attacked a fire rescue hero. Isn't that Captain James? He pulled me out of a fire last time. Everyone knows Captain James's character. How could this woman hit him? Wham! A fist unexpectedly smashed into my face. Before I could react, another woman's hand slapped the other side of my face. Bitch! That's what you get for bullying people. Why couldn't your son have died in the fire instead? Captain James risks his life to save people. Why should everyone revolve around you? It's a shame your son didn't die. The barrage of insults came in waves. People threw eggs and vegetables from their shopping baskets at me, while men flicked their half-smoked cigarettes at my face. My face, already blackened by smoke and fire, now looked even more miserable. The hands restraining me trembled slightly. James quickly spoke up. Everyone, please calm down. We'll handle this according to protocol. Don't get physical. Despite his words, he didn't release me. The crowd's anger wasn't quelled by his few sentences. Instead, it intensified. Even the team members couldn't stop them from attacking me. Through the crowd, I saw Emma being helped to her feet. As everyone comforted her, she wiped the corner of her eye with her knuckle while sobbing, making even more people feel sorry for her. My eyes reddened with rage. I nearly cracked my teeth from clenching them so hard, but I still couldn't break free from James's grip. Stop. A thunderous command blasted through a megaphone, putting an end to this farce. Commander. James spotted the bandaged man approaching and released his hold on me. Slap. A hand struck James directly across the face. James. Emma cried out, rushing over to examine the red mark on his cheek. She then frowned at the commander. Who do you think you are to hit him? The commander completely ignored her, staring straight at James. Is this how you handle situations? Instead of cleaning up this mess, you're guiding public opinion with some random woman and escalating the situation? We're here to put out fires, not for you to start them everywhere. Don't you understand how detrimental your actions are? Who are you calling some random woman? I'm Emma. James cut off her attempt to talk back to the commander. The commander gave Emma a cold look before turning to James and pointing at him. This is a serious matter. Both of you have committed major errors, and I won't let this slide. Commander. James's body visibly tensed as he moved slightly closer to Emma, as if to shield her. Actually, she's not. Shut up. The commander silenced him harshly. I must discipline you this time. What? James froze momentarily. Then his eyes brightened. Discipline? Me? Did you think I would let you off after such a serious mistake? The commander tossed these words at him and turned to leave. James immediately stood at attention, facing the commander's back. Yes, sir. I will definitely reflect on my mistakes. He was visibly relieved. He looked back at Emma and smiled gently. It's all right now. Infinite sorrow welled up from the depths of my heart. He wasn't afraid of being disciplined himself. He was afraid Emma would be implicated. Slap. With what little strength I had left, I delivered another hard slap across his face. As Emma gasped in shock, I didn't even spare her a glance. I gave James a cold, hard stare, then turned and walked away with determined steps. After having a lawyer draft divorce papers, I called James many times, but he wouldn't answer. On the 15th call, he finally picked up. Emma's son is still in the hospital. He needs someone to look after him. Can you stop being jealous at such an inappropriate time? Even now, he thought I was calling because I was jealous? My voice was ice cold. James, come home once and let's get this divorce done. His voice sounded impatient. I said stop being jealous. Why are you getting worse and worse? Don't you know Emma's son has a congenital heart condition? And if it weren't for you, he wouldn't have been injured so badly. Emma has been raising her son alone since her divorce. What's wrong with me lending her a hand? This is a matter of life and death. Stop looking at everything through your petty, jealous eyes. With that, he hung up. When I called back, I got a notification that I'd been blocked. This was his usual tactic. Whenever he used his limited time off to take care of Emma and her son, I would bombard him with calls. He had grown accustomed to blocking me when I made a fuss, then unblocking me after he finished taking care of Emma and her son. But this time, I wasn't planning to argue with him and then continue our life together as I had done in the past. By the time I reached the hospital, Chung was playing with the Optimus Prime toy James had bought him. After speaking with the doctor, I learned that Chung only had some minor scrapes. He had merely fainted from fear at the fire scene and wasn't seriously hurt at all. Yet this minor injury had become a serious condition, in James's words. At that moment, James was completely engrossed in playing with Optimus Prime alongside Chung, not even noticing my arrival. I stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face. James, have you visited Tiger at all these past few days? Instead, you're here playing with someone else's son. James ignored the slap because Chung was clearly frightened by my outburst. His little mouth quivered, ready to cry. James quickly stuffed the Optimus Prime toy into Cheng's hands and gently comforted him. It's okay. Uncle will be right back. He then pulled me to the far end of the hallway. I struggled hard and finally broke free when we stopped, immediately giving him another slap. His head turned slightly to the side. He sighed impatiently. Why are you causing a scene at the hospital? Chung was seriously injured because of you. Are you here to blame us for that too? I laughed bitterly in my rage. Seriously injured? I checked. He only has scrapes. Tiger has respiratory burns. Have you visited him? You probably don't even know that Tiger and Chung are in the same hospital. James paused, then sighed. How many times do I have to tell you? Chung has a congenital heart condition. Tiger is a perfectly healthy child. He just needs to recover from his injuries. But Chung could have an attack from the slightest stress. How can you compare them? Stop being unreasonable. I'm exhausted lately. Isn't it enough that I'll come home tonight? He reached for my arm. Come on, I'll walk you downstairs. Sure, after you sign this first. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and slapped them against his chest. Seeing the black and white divorce agreement, he froze, then looked at me in disbelief. Divorce? Olivia, have you become this unreasonable? Even jealousy should have its limits. Even now, he still thought I had feelings for him. I said coldly, sign it or not. If not, I'll see you in court. You. He paused, then furrowed his brow and began to study my expression carefully. He finally seemed to realize I wasn't joking. I lifted my chin. If you don't have any objections, just sign it. Considering what you've done to Tiger, I get custody and you leave with nothing. I object. A loud shout rang out. I turned to see Emma strutting toward us in her Saint Laurent high heels, carrying a new Chanel bag. She positioned herself beside James. Why should James leave with nothing? If anyone should leave with nothing, it's you. Emma hooked her arm through James's and lifted her chin at me. James risks his life out there to make money, while all you did was have a child and enjoy the good life. If anyone should leave, it's you. Looking at her haughty expression, I found it almost amusing. She probably had no idea who had paid for her designer outfit. I raised my chin. And what if I refuse? Then let everyone judge who should really leave. Her voice was loud, drawing curious looks from patients and visitors who began gathering around. James's eyes darted nervously. He whispered to her, enough, don't escalate this. She's the one escalating it. Emma pouted. She lives off you, doesn't have to do anything, and wants you to leave with nothing just because you helped an old friend. How ridiculous. I crossed my arms leisurely, watching her performance with knowing eyes. The onlookers loved this drama, whispering among themselves. She lives off him, spends his money, and then wants him to leave with nothing? That's hilarious. In my village, women like her get beaten. That looks like Captain James. Only someone with his good character could tolerate such a shameless woman. Emma seemed to relish these comments. Her smile grew more smug as she straightened her posture. James, however, was growing increasingly anxious. I chuckled softly. Seems we can't resolve this. Fine, I'll see you in court then. Let the judge evaluate your actions and decide who's right and who's wrong. I agree. James suddenly grabbed my arm. He frowned deeply. There's no need to go to court. His gaze flickered toward Emma. She and her son have to live too. My smile turned bitter. Of course. What he cared about most was always Emma and her son's reputation. If this went to court, not only would his actions be criticized, but Emma would also be condemned as the other woman. But, Olivia, I can agree to everything else. Just let me keep the house in the west side of town. Emma panicked. James, how could you agree so quickly? You worked so hard for all of that. Plus, Chung and I. James ignored her, looking steadily at me. That's my only request. No, I replied calmly but firmly. Slap. A sudden, unexpected blow landed on my face. Emma glared at me furiously. You bitch. How dare you be so ungrateful? James earned that money through his hard work. What right do you have to take everything? My cheek burned. James visibly panicked, raising his hand to pull Emma back, but it was too late. I raised my hand high and slapped Emma hard across the face. Even in her high heels, she was still half a head shorter than me. My slap nearly knocked her off balance. If James hadn't caught her, she would have fallen hard. I have every right because my name is on the deed. Because I paid for that house in full. I looked down at her imperiously. Not only was Emma stunned, but so were the onlookers who had been judging me. I leaned forward slightly, looking at Emma. You think James's few thousand a month salary can afford your Chanel, Gucci, and Saint Laurent? Let me put it this way. Without my $60,000 to $70,000 monthly income supporting this household, this family would have fallen apart long ago. James himself would have starved. Do you know who paid for your entire outfit? From your hairstyling to those high heels to that pure gold necklace around your neck. I reached up and grabbed the necklace on her neck, yanking it hard. It's all my money. The necklace snapped from her neck, but Emma just stood there like an idiot, too shocked to even resist. I tilted my head, smiling sarcastically. Everything you've eaten and used that belongs to me, you'll have to pay it all back. With that, I turned and strode away. I tossed the broken gold necklace behind me, and countless onlookers reached out simultaneously to catch it. Only Emma and James remained frozen in place. This argument had already been filmed by bystanders and posted online. What was initially perceived as a gold digger trying to seize a man's assets suddenly transformed into a story of a man using his wife's money to support his ex-lover and her son. The video's popularity skyrocketed to the top of the charts. I struck while the iron was hot and posted the full truth of these years online. In reality, marrying James was marrying down for me. I was a designer who had made a name for myself, a successful self-made businesswoman who had built everything from scratch. So I didn't obsess over finding someone from the same social status. That's why, after James rescued me from the fire, I fell for this man despite our enormous income gap. After marriage, I never explicitly explained who earned the money in our household. On the contrary, I admired James's generous nature. Seeing him often using his salary to help others, I would compassionately supplement his income with my own. Including my premarital property in the west side of town, I gave him usage rights because he always liked to rescue stray animals, and that place made it convenient for him to care for them. But I never imagined that a recent investigation would reveal that Emma and her son had moved into that house long ago. And most of the money I gave James had been subsidizing them as well. Of course, this alone wasn't enough to bring him down. These were just emotional groundwork. After my rebirth, I had been collecting evidence about that fire scene. When that evidence was published online, netizens saw that Building B was actually accessible for rescue, but James had claimed it wasn't, all to direct everyone to rescue Emma's son. Not only that, photos were leaked showing James ignoring his own son's shock condition while desperately performing CPR on Chung, who only had minor scrapes. Suddenly, the scandal of James's dereliction of duty spread like wildfire. Under pressure, the fire department had no choice but to suspend him pending investigation. In all fairness, James had performed excellently at the rescue team for many years. His superiors had high hopes for him, wanting him to become a role model for the fire department. But Emma didn't fare so well. She became universally condemned as a homewrecker. Many people spontaneously gathered around the house in the west side of town, waiting daily to throw rotten eggs at Emma. Sometimes when Emma took Ching out, they would find a coffin placed at their doorstep with red paint that read, "Homewrecker must die." Not to mention the frequent middle-of-the-night attacks when someone would shatter her bedroom window. After a while, Chung, who already had a heart condition, couldn't take the harassment. Emma went from stubbornly refusing to leave to actively packing her bags and fleeing with her son. But I had already cut off all financial support to James. He was suspended without pay, so he had no income. This meant Emma had no income either. So she devised a plan. On the day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for my new design company, a woman stood on a 6th-floor balcony. All the industry VIPs attending and passers-by gathered around. The banner that should have displayed celebratory messages for the opening had been replaced with, "Olivia ruined my family." I looked up. Emma was standing at the height, holding her child, her long hair fluttering in the wind. Her face was pale, her eyes slightly red, with faint tear streaks. The wind blew through her white clothes, creating an indescribably tragic scene. The child in her arms had his eyes tightly closed, breathing weakly. It was her son, Chung. Ching's condition required continuous medication. Previously, James had been using my money to subsidize them. Now that I had cut off the supply and reclaimed the money James had spent on her, Emma found herself with nothing. Chung could no longer afford his medicine. During the lively atmosphere, Emma suddenly fell to her knees with a thud, crying as she spoke. Standing here today is truly my last resort. My son and I have been friends with Mrs. Olivia's husband for many years. 6 months ago, my son was trapped in a fire. Mrs. Olivia's husband, as the fire captain, rescued my son despite the danger. But I never expected Mrs. Olivia would assume her husband and I were having an affair because of this. She not only sued her husband, leaving him with nothing, but also demanded a huge compensation from me. I've begged her multiple times. My son has a congenital heart condition, and her husband and I never crossed any boundaries. But she still took away what little property I had left. She's a successful businesswoman with resources I can't match. If I tried to seek justice, she would undoubtedly use her money to silence me. I had no choice but to resort to this. Today, I just want justice. I want back the peaceful life that rightfully belongs to my son and me. I believe justice lies in people's hearts. This humble woman hopes everyone can help me. If I can't get justice, I'll have no choice but to take my son to join his deceased father. As she finished, she bent down and knocked her forehead against the ground in a deep bow, refusing to straighten up. Her acting was excellent. Combined with her attractive appearance, many people were filled with righteous indignation. Is she crazy? Isn't it normal for firefighters to save people? Just because of this Olivia woman accuses them of having an affair. Exactly. Firefighters save more women in their lifetime than an emperor has concubines. Are we still practicing monogamy or what? That's outrageous. Being suspected for saving someone, should firefighters call spouses for permission before rescuing people next time? I hope Mrs. Olivia dies in a fire. Emma maintained her bowing position, but the corner of her mouth had imperceptibly curled up. I watched from my car. I took out my phone and called my assistant. Just as the crowd was angrily searching to see if Olivia was present, the large screen originally intended for the ribbon-cutting ceremony suddenly lit up. A series of photos began to scroll. All set in my West Side residence, they showed James cooking with Emma and her son in the kitchen, playing together with Cheng, and the two adults talking by candlelight after putting Cheng to bed. Emma had fallen asleep leaning against James more than once. They looked every bit like a happy family of 3. Yet, James's marriage certificate showed my name. Additionally, I had included evidence about the fire incident that I'd gathered since my rebirth. Some people suddenly remembered what had been nearly forgotten. Holy shit. Isn't this about that firefighter who neglected his duty for his ex-lover 6 months ago? What? It's them? This woman has the nerve to show her face in public. In an instant, public opinion completely reversed. Emma, standing on the balcony, panicked as the crowd below no longer wanted to help her seek justice. Instead, everyone shouted in unison. Didn't you say you'd jump if you couldn't get justice? Go ahead and jump. Don't tell me you were just bluffing. Yeah, you should be jumping with your child now. Emma, who had earlier seemed ready to die for her cause, now clutched her child, refusing to move an inch. Seeing this, people below started using slingshots to fire small pebbles upward. Emma ducked, trying to escape, only to discover that she had locked the balcony door earlier to avoid being disturbed by company staff. Amid the chaos, the balcony door suddenly opened. A hand grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her away. I frowned and called my assistant. The exit is blocked. Force them out. Soon after, a man was pushed out of the company building with the crowd, his arm around Emma. He had covered her head with his jacket to hide her face, while shielding her with his body. His baseball cap was pulled low, concealing his own face as well. I got out of the car, took a megaphone, and shouted, "James, even now, you're still protecting her." The crowd erupted like a stone, creating ripples in water. So that's the guy named James? Damn, what a scumbag. Still protecting this homewrecker. I'm going to beat him to death. James's cap was yanked off, and in his panic, he looked toward me. I stood by my car, coldly watching as the crowd surrounded these two people. I leaned against the car, observing the scene with composure. Fortunately, the police arrived in time, otherwise, these two might not have made it out of the crowd alive. The heat from James's dereliction of duty scandal had almost died down, but he just had to risk himself to rescue Emma when she was in trouble. Now, the revived public opinion intensified, roaring and demanding that James be punished. This time, his superiors didn't protect him. He was fired outright and faced enormous fines. As for Emma, this farce had completely backfired on her. More internet users unleashed online and offline violence against her. Chang, whose health was already precarious, had a severe attack due to the harassment and couldn't be saved. Emma went mad, getting into physical fights with the harassers, eventually stabbing someone to death with a fruit knife. Even as the police arrested her, she was still wildly swinging the knife. She had completely lost her mind. But James was in no position to help her anymore. On the day of our divorce, before signing the agreement, he looked at Tiger standing beside me with a bitter smile. Let me keep Tiger. Didn't he always want to be a great hero like his dad? It would be easier for me to teach him. Unexpectedly, Tiger stepped back behind me, looking at James with endless resentment and disappointment. That look seemed to cut James to the quick. His outstretched hand froze in midair as he stared at Tiger in disbelief. Tiger, it's Dad. Tiger frowned. Dad is bad. Dad lied to Mom. Dad didn't save Tiger. Dad saved Miss Chen's son. Dad is not a great hero. James's breathing became unsteady. I pulled Tiger closer to me and spoke softly. Tiger used to love you very much, but that was because I always taught him that you loved him. James's eyes reddened. I looked at him. But did you deserve those lies of mine? No. Olivia, I do love you and our child. Those weren't lies. Does it matter? I asked. He froze. What? Does love that's only in words matter? Should our child and I live in a fantasy? That's not it. Olivia. Enough, James. I stood up. If you truly love us like you claim, then sign the papers. James held his head in his hands for a long time before finally picking up the pen with trembling hands and signing. Taking back the divorce agreement, I pulled my suitcase and took Tiger's hand. I've sold this house. The new owners move in tomorrow. You should pack up and prepare to leave too. The door closed. Not long after, news came of James's suicide. I paid no attention. Tiger was still playing with his toy fire truck, looking at me excitedly. Mom, I want to be a real hero when I grow up. I'll rescue everyone who's suffering from fires. I stroked his head and smiled gently. Yes, my little hero.